Good evening. Good evening. I'm Barbara Eckstein. I'm president of the Johnson County United Nations Association. On behalf of the JCUNA and our partners for this evening's event, the Iowa City Public Library, the Iowa City Office of Equity and Human Rights, and the Refugee and Immigrant Association, I want to welcome our panelists and all of you sitting here and those at home to this discussion of Iowans' perspective on the refugee crisis and the UN response. The Johnson County United Nations Association begins this gathering acknowledging our presence in this county and this state on the historical homelands of several indigenous nations. We also acknowledge the continued presence among us of the Omaha tribe of Nebraska and Iowa, the Ponca tribe of Nebraska, the Meskwaki, and the Ho-Chunk. We affirm that the history and presence of indigenous peoples will inform our work to promote the United Nations. Now I'd like to introduce the past president of JCUNA, Jim Olson, who will be our moderator this evening. Thank you.
Thank you, Barbara, and thank all of you for attending this evening. And I want to thank our several co-sponsors and our panelists. We have really a rich assemblage of people both here in the room and also virtually. And we have a lot of ground to cover tonight. And so we'll just plunge right in. I'd like to begin by introducing the panelists, first starting with the panelists who are here in the room. Starting on my right, your left, Felician Nkulaki, who was originally from Rwanda and lived in Congo and Zambia before moving to Iowa City in 2009. Felician is active in the Refugee and Immigrant Association and, in fact, chairs their parent committee. Next is Elizabeth Bernal. Elizabeth Bernal was originally from Mexico, and she is a leader in the community of immigrants and refugees from Central America. Elizabeth is the co-founder of Open Heartland, which is an organization serving that community. To my right is Ray Mo, whose parents fled from Burma to Thailand, and they lived in a refugee camp in Thailand, and Ray Mo was born there. She came to the United States when she was 9 years old, and she is a staff member with Embark, which is actually the first refugee-led organization serving refugees in Iowa. And she and her colleagues have come from Waterloo to be in this event. Then I'd like to turn to our two remote panelists. First is Mak Sucheska, who is in Des Moines. Mak is the Director for Refugee Resettlement for the Iowa Department of, there he is, the Iowa Department of Human Services. He came to Iowa as a child, as a Bosnian refugee, and he has in fact devoted his career to human services and serving refugees who are resettled in our state. And then fifth, we have from Washington, D.C., Christopher Boyan, who is a senior communications officer and spokesperson for the UN Refugee Agency, UNHCR. Mr. Boyan is based in Washington, and he works with a number of constituencies to provide accurate information about the work of the UN Refugee Agency. Before joining UNHCR, Christopher spent 3 decades overseas as a news correspondent covering political and security issues across Europe, the Middle East, and Asia. So you can see here we're very blessed to have people representing diverse viewpoints, and we will, I'm sure, have a very rich discussion. I'd like to give an overview of what we're going to try to cover tonight. First, I'm going to say a few words about refugee rights in the context of human rights. I'll call upon Chris Boyan to describe the scope and challenge of the work of the UNHCR. We will hear perspectives from our panelists. We will have an opportunity for questions and answers from the audience. And then at the conclusion of the program, the Refugee and Immigrant Association will present awards to 2 of their members, and will also send you on your way with some ideas about how you can support refugees. This event tonight is being held in commemoration of Human Rights Day, which will be this Saturday, December 10th. December 10th is the anniversary of one of the landmark achievements of the United Nations, and that is the adoption of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights in 1948. The Universal Declaration of Human Rights is a milestone in our history because it affirms that all people, regardless of who they are, enjoy certain fundamental rights. Mrs. Franklin D. Roosevelt, Eleanor Roosevelt, was the chair of the commission that drafted the Universal Declaration of Human Rights, which was adopted by the UN General Assembly on December 10th of 1948. So the Universal Declaration is 74 years old. Next year we'll celebrate the 75th anniversary of the Declaration. In honor of Human Rights Day, Mayor Teague of Iowa City issued a proclamation saying that December 10th is Human Rights Day here in Iowa City. And so we're very grateful to the mayor for making that proclamation. The Universal Declaration states one of the fundamental rights which refugees enjoy. In fact, I've got here in my hands a little copy of the Universal Declaration. We had these copies on the table as you entered. And if you've got your copy there, I direct your attention to Article 14, which states that everyone has the right to seek and to enjoy in other countries asylum from persecution. Asylum from persecution simply means protection. If someone is forced to flee from their country of origin due to war or violence, they have a right to seek asylum elsewhere, and they have the right to enjoy the same rights that all people enjoy. So the Universal Declaration is the basis of refugee rights. In 1951, the member states of the UN adopted a refugee convention or treaty which provided a definition of what a refugee is. And according to that definition, a refugee is a person who has a well-founded fear of persecution for reasons of race, religion, nationality, political opinion, or membership in a particular social group. That is the legal definition of what is a refugee. There are a lot of people on the move. There are a lot of people who would like to achieve that refugee status, and they are known as asylum seekers. And then there are others who aren't forced to flee, but in fact decide voluntarily that they want to move from one country to another. Those are migrants, which in the UN's definition are not, strictly speaking, refugees. The 1951 convention stated that refugees enjoy the same rights as everyone else. The UN High Commissioner for Refugees, the UN Refugee Agency, was founded the previous year in 1950, and the UNHCR is the guardian of refugee rights as outlined in the 1951 convention. That 1951 convention applied to refugees in Europe, and it applied to people who were refugees prior to 1951. In 1967, the UN adopted a protocol which expanded the rights of refugees to include refugees everywhere and at all times. So, with this background, we meet here tonight at a time when there is a very pronounced crisis. In our publicity, we described it as a refugee crisis. That's not really quite accurate. It's not a refugee crisis, it's a political crisis. The number of refugees, the number of forcibly displaced persons, has swollen to nearly 100 million people. And most of these forcibly displaced people are women and children. And there are 100 million forcibly displaced persons. That means there are 100 million different stories. And so somewhat dangerous to generalize about all of these people. I think for us here in the United States, we're probably aware of the number of asylum seekers south of our border who are seeking refugee status in the United States. They come from Central America and from Cuba and Venezuela. I think we're also aware of the thousands of Afghan evacuees who came from Afghanistan to the United States. And we're also aware of a number of displaced Ukrainians. Also, a great number of them have come to the United States. The Afghans and the Ukrainians are not strictly refugees. They are here under a humanitarian parole. They're not exactly refugees, but I think for our purposes tonight, we can include them in our discussion. So with that background, I'd like to call on Chris Boyan, who is in Washington, to describe to us the work of the UN High Commissioner for Refugees and with reference to refugee rights. So Chris, welcome. We look forward to hearing you.
Thank you. Thank you. Can you hear me all right?
Yes, we can hear you.
Fantastic. Great. Thank you, Jim. Thank you very much for the invitation, and thanks to all of you for being here tonight and for taking an interest in refugees and refugee issues and the rights of refugees. I think Jim just provided an excellent, comprehensive overview of how refugees are defined in the 1951 Refugee Convention, and essentially of the notion that refugees have rights. And I think before I even talk further about what my organization does and the history of our organization, I think I'll stop right there and make a distinction. Refugees is a word. It's a word that we need to use primarily for legal reasons and for categorizing people in various situations. But one of the most important things to understand is refugees are human beings just like you and me. No different. They have the same dreams, aspirations, need for basic human dignity that every one of us in this room tonight has. And so we make that distinction for legal reasons in matters of international law and basically to afford protection to people that are running for their lives. But I'd make that point first of all. Jim, you asked me to provide a quick overview of our organization, so I'm not going to repeat what you've already provided, which was a really excellent and comprehensive overview. That's the UN Refugee Agency was indeed created in 1950, and in that respect, it's also important to remember that some of the things you mentioned just now in your introductory remarks, the 1948 Universal Declaration on Human Rights, that the establishment of the United Nations and the 1948 Universal Declaration on Human Rights, followed by the creation of the UN Refugee Agency, all of these things occurred in the aftermath of this colossal cataclysm for humanity. And it was a time when there was a global consensus, not among any one government or sets of governments, but among all people, really. All human beings decided this must never occur again. And that was sort of the guiding principle following World War II that led to the development of all of these instruments of international law and the things that we see today and continue to work to improve all the time. It was this notion that this must never be allowed to happen again. And so I think the purpose of the discussion tonight is to look at human rights in commemoration of Human Rights Day, which is upcoming, and look at human rights as that applies to refugees. And I think it is important to recall that this was a phenomenon that was agreed upon by really all the peoples and all the governments of the world, that people, all people, and that includes people that have been forcibly uprooted, forced to flee from their homes due to a well-founded fear of persecution and violence in their homelands, who are running for their lives, must be afforded these rights as human beings, like we all have, like all people have. And that's where we are now. My organization is now over 70 years old, and it's interesting because when the UN Refugee Agency was created in 1950, it was only ever meant to be a short-term project. We were established partly to consolidate some other efforts, the International Refugee Organization after World War II, and some other temporary efforts that were being organized to help the millions of people who have been displaced, especially in Europe, but not only in Europe, from their homes to return to their homes, to return to a safe life and lives of dignity. And since then, so the UN Refugee Agency was only ever meant to last for 3 years. And it was only meant to support governments at the time in organizing durable solutions for those people who had been uprooted by the war. Here we are more than 70 years later, and the refugee situations around the world continue to grow, and the needs of forcibly uprooted people around the world continue to expand and need to be addressed. And there is still a consensus in the world about the need, frankly, to assist your fellow human being in a moment of vulnerability and in a moment of need. And I think one of the principles and one of the ideas at the core of everything my agency does, and that all of our agencies do together, is the notion that people expect to and have the right to expect to be treated by communities that host them, by the communities that they flee to. They expect to be treated with basic human dignity and to be afforded safety. So I don't know how much detail, we don't need to go into a lot of detail right now about the whole body of law and international instruments and domestic law in the United States and many countries. But these rights are recognized around the world as things that must be upheld, that countries, that governments and peoples have an obligation, a moral obligation and a legal obligation that has been freely and conscientiously chosen to protect people in those situations. So I'll stop there for now. I don't want to monopolize too much of the time, but if we want to talk more about that, we will, I'm sure.
Thank you, Chris. I want to now turn to our panel in the room, and Chris made the point that we're actually talking about people here. We talk about conventions and treaties and definitions and legalisms, but we're really talking about people. And so to move from these abstract topics to really some of the individual and personal experiences of people who are refugees, I'd like to ask the members of the panel in the room if they could share some of their refugee experiences, either their own or experiences which they know of other members of their community, and how they felt or did not feel that their rights as human beings and as refugees were either being protected or, in fact, were threatened. And so I'd like to begin with Felician. Felician, you may sit where you are if you'd like. We've got microphones for everyone, so.
Good evening, everybody. My name is Immaculée. I'm not Felician. He made a little bit mistake.
Oh, I'm sorry.
Yeah. So I was born in Rwanda, 1994. I fled to Republic Democratic of Congo. 1997, I fled to Zambia, and in 2009, I came to the United States of America. So my life in refugee camp, I lived in 2 different refugee camps, but the life is very hard. I don't wish any one of you can be a refugee. It is a life of sadness, depression, anxiety, poverty. It is too bad to stay in a refugee camp. Hunger, especially when you have children, you don't have enough food to feed them. The maize they gave is 13.5 kgs per person per month, 3.6 kgs per person per month, 0.6 liters of cooking oil, and the 0.3 for salt. So that is not enough for a person to feed himself. So sometimes you go to search somewhere, different places to ask for food, to ask for clothing, and some people will ignore you, some people will feel pity on you, they will give you something. And cooking was very hard to find the firewood. When we go to the bush to look for firewood, you may meet some people in the bush, they will rape you if you are a woman, or they'll beat you. They will beat you, they will do bad things against you. So the first refugee camp, we had no job or anything. The second in Zambia, at least we were given some places to farm, because they feed us for 2 years, and the other years you have to self-sufficient. So it was not easy. If, like myself, I did not cultivate before, I started learning so that my children cannot suffer from malnutrition. So it is hard to say. It can take days and days to tell you how in a refugee camp is very sad to live there. Dizziness, you know, in a refugee camp we are concentrated. We live one close to another one, and the hygiene is poor, and you get sick, different kind of disease. There is malaria there, there is cholera there, there is different kind of disease. So many people, my friend, they died because of hunger or because of disease, because we did not have enough medicine to take. Even if you take medicine and you are hungry already, your body is already affected. Without food, medicine cannot, it can help, but it cannot do everything you need. Yeah. Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you. Elizabeth?
Well, thank you everyone for being here and take your time. I appreciate that you're hearing to us. And I'm immigrant, original from Mexico myself, but kind of like I wasn't know a lot about migration when I moved to United States. And I started learning pretty soon what is being an immigrant in the United States and different countries. So that's kind of like, was in 2001 when I moved to United States. And the reason that make me move it, I think, is probably because I was very, like, I get adopted with my uncle and my aunt, but they didn't have a job, so it was kind of like a more probably that make me feel like I need to move, because I was pregnant and I have a baby, but I didn't have the money for go to the doctor or hospital, so I have my baby in the house. Didn't make the baby, so We lost the baby because I didn't get to, sorry. I didn't get the chance to go to the doctor because we didn't have money. Barely we can make it for eating by the day. And so I started learning that if I'm not going to the doctor, I'm gonna miss my other baby when I get pregnant again. So we start making choices and take the decision to move. So, and like, she just say that crossing the border, it's kind of like really hard for all the people, refugees and immigrants, because we've been going through so much. We get in jail, kind of like a criminal people, even we didn't do anything. The treat in the jail, it's not easy, it's really hard, so it get too cold sometimes inside. You didn't get the right food. If you're sick, they didn't get to see you the right doctor, so it's basically more like a criminal person. And thank you. And so I was thinking it just kind of like in that time, but lately I started learning more about this. Is kind of like short of story of myself, but I've been working with the kids in the school district. Now we have non-companion kids who are coming in their own age, 13, 7 years old to 18 years old. So if I suffer myself and feel bad about moving to my country, thinking of those kids who are moving in their own, and the parents have to take and thinking and say that you have to leave because any reason that they have, kids, they have to leave. For one, I hear in stories that they said I was sleeping and my parents say, wake up at the middle of the night because you need to leave right now. They don't have no explanation, they just grab them and they have to move right away. And the border, when they move in from country to other different country and they have to cross a lot of borders, moving to one shelter to another shelter, they have to really brave because they can be raping the women or kids or any other people. When they get to the border in Mexico, they have another food-related, no clothing, no anything, so they don't get the same support. They get to the border in Mexico to United States, is the same thing. They put it in the cage, they stay in there for longer, they divide in girls for boys, and they give a lot of vaccine that one kid can get 10 vaccine at the same time. They get so sick, and sometimes they have stories that they see their own friend losing their lives in the cage because they don't know what kind of vaccine. They didn't never explain anything about it. So it is hard to believe that this time it still happens more and more frequently, and we have more refugees coming from other places. But it's not only the adults, it's the entire family or their own kids and their own way to find a place to live. So it's a lot of story that we can share and we keep in an eye what's going on, but it's not why they move. I think the question is kind of like how we can support them, because they already have a lot of issues with them, bring with them, that it's not way to say like why. I think it's just kind of like if you can just sit a little bit and thinking why is the reason. It's not like worth your time. It's probably just thinking like how we can help you and support you, because it's already a lot through their mental and their physical and all the ways. Like the kids are so vulnerable because sometimes they feel like nobody understands what's going on. And we try to understand because we came in the same way. But for them, it's why I left my country and my parents and my country. Why I'm here on my own, why I have to suffer all this. And it's just kind of like all depression, the mental health, it comes with all this stuff. Christmas is coming and they don't have a family close here, their culture living in there, and here it's kind of like angry. So I think it's more kind of like thinking how we can support, just stop and thinking how we can support each one and be more human to each other.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Very powerful. Thank you. Right?
Hi, my name is Rimal, and I'm came to United States when I was 9 years old. My parents was born and from Burma, and they have to flee their country and have to go to Thailand refugee camp because of the war, which is thinking that it's already end, but it's never really end, which is worse. The war still going on right now. My parent country and experience grew up in a refugee camp it's like she mentioned it's very hard and it's not easy to get through stuff. Like in Thailand refugee camp, in order to survive, you have to look into the in the refugee camp first before you even go outside and trying to find a job, trying to find something to bring in home for the food for family, and also education and healthcare. It's very poor. That is one of the reasons why I'm here today too, because of a poor health system and other things. I have suffered physically a lot, and also I'm so thankful of how my parents, they are like very, very like strong and able to come to United States. I'm like thankful for them to apply to come to United States. So then we here have a better healthcare and better education, because in when I grew up in a refugee camp for the 8 or 9 years, I see my parents work very hard, and even with minimalism, like even with little things they have, provide for family, and it just I don't know how to explain how you feel like, but you got like to try to get through the days. It's like day to day, like you gotta fight for food to like base day to day. Today's like it's not like a 1 month thing. It's like every day you gotta wake up and trying to find something to eat and trying to find something like to do. So then the parents, kids have something in, for at nighttime, not going hungry in bed. But yeah, thank you.
Wow. These are very, very moving and very powerful stories, and I'm so grateful that you're all three willing to share and help us better understand. I'm struck by one theme that I hear in all of these stories, and that is the strength and resilience of refugees, the ability to persevere in the face of these tremendous situations in your life. It's in a way, you know, it's both inspiring and humbling for the rest of us. I'd like to turn the question to Mark, who was a child, like maybe 30 years ago, when he and his family left Bosnia for the United States, and maybe he'd share some of his stories. But also, since he is the director of refugee resettlement here in the state of Iowa, maybe he could speak more generally about trends, and he might. I haven't warned him about this, but I think there's an interest in Afghan and Ukrainian people now living in Iowa, and maybe you can share some of that.
Sure. Well, good evening to you all. Can you hear me okay?
Yes.
Yes, we can.
Excellent. Well, I appreciate the opportunity to be here with you tonight, and I'm very fortunate to be a part of this network and the colleagues that shared their stories, as well as Chris's background on what's happening at the global level and with respect to the work that UNHCR is doing. I think this is an opportune time for us to really come together and to talk about what the needs are of refugees, the realities that the refugee situation presents, not only to those who are affected, but the welcoming communities that are anticipating arrivals, and then what we can do long term to sustain a viable network in helping support our most vulnerable residents. So as mentioned before, my name is Max Sucheska, and I serve as the Bureau Chief and State Refugee Coordinator for Iowa. In my role, I help oversee the resettlement of refugees, but also the long-term integration process of refugee and ORR, which is, again, Office of Refugee Resettlement, eligible populations. Our role at the Bureau, and my role in particular, is helping to identify and provide technical supports to our resettlement partners, nonprofits, and ethnic-based community organizations, as they are really the ones leading the efforts in ensuring that all refugees and new Iowans coming to the state have the supports and services they need to be successful and to live a long and thriving life as they make Iowa their home. My story stems back in 1993. I arrived to this country as a refugee, originally from Sarajevo, Bosnia and Herzegovina, in the August of. And if you are from Iowa, that was shortly after the cataclysmic floods that we experienced. So my mom and dad always say that they left a war-torn country to come to a place, potentially suffer malaria. So I guess for what it's worth, there were a lot of extenuating circumstances that affected our refugee journey. But my experience really as a refugee and one of an immigrant story as well really started as I began my life here in the United States. I was very young to really know and remember the exact journey and situations that we faced. I remember bits and pieces, but growing up in a bicultural household, being bilingual, and really trying to find myself and find my identity as a Bosnian American was really my refugee and immigrant story, and really an experience that gives me the privilege and honor to be the bridge between our welcoming communities and those who are being welcomed to them, particularly, of course, refugees and immigrants. So I cherish that responsibility, and I take that responsibility very seriously. It's an honor to be leading this work for the state of Iowa, and hopefully in the coming years we will together leave a legacy to continue Iowa as a welcoming place for all refugees and immigrants. With respect to what we've seen most recently in the trends of refugee resettlement, Jim, to your point, we've seen resettlement really change almost to a 180-degree turn from what it used to be to kind of what it is today. As we saw the influx of Afghan evacuees resettled to states across the country with the Ukrainian humanitarian crisis, and even an influx of Cuban and Haitian entrants coming to the country, in particular to Iowa, we've seen a drastic change not only in the overall numbers of arrivals to the state, but of course the approach and national policy towards immigration and refugee resettlement. Resettlement as a network looked very differently 4 years ago with the previous presidential administration, 6 years ago now. So when we look at what has changed, we see infrastructures that were completely either diminished or severely lacking in funding and staffing, to programs across the country that were halted or even dismantled. And with the new presidential administration, that completely flipped to 180, where we saw a change in rhetoric to overall approaches of immigration and refugee resettlement, to once again starting to rebuild an infrastructure network that was lost. But we had circumstances that really affected our ability to successfully create an infrastructure that would be sustained within these next 2 to 3 years, these most previous 2 to 3 years. Iowa was greatly affected by 2 natural disasters. The global pandemic adversely affected refugee and immigrant communities, and now most recently with the pullout of the United States out of Afghanistan and subsequent resettlement of some 76,000 individuals across the country, pair that with the humanitarian crisis out of Ukraine, resettlement really had its work cut out for them. Not only the agencies providing the work, the ethnic community-based organizations who are leading most of the efforts as well alongside resettlement, but refugees really being affected themselves. The national housing crisis that we've seen for many years, affecting our ability to access and sustain permanent housing for new arrivals, let alone those We've been here for some time. Infrastructures with respect to culturally and linguistically appropriate services and resources, finding interpreters and translation opportunities and accessibility to those resources. That was really a challenge. We've been now in about a year and a half of the resettlement of Afghans, and I would say overall, the resettlement efforts have gone as well as they can. Of course, within resettlement and how complex the entire system is, there will be gaps and holes where we are still trying to fill. Some are out of our control, and we know that. But in areas where we can support, not only at the local and state level, we are looking to our federal partners as well in the forms of funding, program development, and overall infrastructural support to be able to create a network that if another crisis were to occur, or even with the looming presidential elections, positions were to change, we have a system that would allow us to be successful in our ability to help support refugees. So as we look to the future and the situations that we're facing, we are going to continue to receive refugees. Resettlement doesn't just end. It a lot of times looks differently, but it is incumbent upon us as a network and as a nation to really ensure that our most vulnerable have what they need to be successful and to integrate into these new communities, to provide infrastructures and systems that are conducive to everyone's success, whether that's translating documents and providing language access, whether that's working with local food pantries and grocers to provide culturally appropriate foods, and then to look at our complex systems and how do we bring in the word of citizens and the words of people and have their input in how we change some of these systems that are far too outdated and really put a lot of people behind the 8 ball. So I'm happy and honored to be a part of this work, and I look forward to answering any questions that folks may have tonight. But most importantly, I'm proud to be an Iowan and proud to be living here and helping support our refugees.
Oh, thank you, Mark. Your remarks are an excellent segue into the next question that I want to pose to the panelists. And I want to ask everyone, now that you're Iowans living in Iowa, I wonder if you could share with us how refugees help each other. Some of you have touched on this already, but if you could maybe elaborate upon that or share your perspectives on how within your communities refugees help each other. And Immaculée, if you'd begin.
Thank you. Since I came in Iowa, it was in 2013. I was in a different state. I started going to school, learning English as a second language because I speak a little bit. And I started learning citizenship because I was speaking a little bit of English and the French and the Swahili and the Kirundi Kinyarwanda. We were a group of many people were working on citizenship. When they did not understand something, I could help to understand. So I was like, I am, even today, I was a liaison between African immigrant and those who speak French, Swahili, Kirundi, Kinyarwanda. So I am there to help them. I am there to, when they wanted to apply for green card, I work with a church where we help people to apply for green card, travel document. I'm there to interpret, to apply for citizenship. If they want help, like applying for energy assistance, I'm there to help them to fill out the applications. If they need help, like they need food, they don't have enough at home, I take there where they can find the food in the food pantry. And when we wanted to do gardens, I know where you can go and ask Then I help my friends. We do our gardens so that we can eat fresh food from the garden to the table. And I help the African Immigrant and Association group. Yeah, there are many women, they are single mothers, they have children, they need to go to school, and the mom has to go at work, and the children have to go to school, and they don't have transportation. During winter time, it is very cold, they have to walk, and we made a meeting with those people behind there, and there is a Felician, I don't know where he is. Felician is there, he's the one who brought an idea to buy a van so that they can help children to go to school without walking. There is some dangerous thing they can meet on the way when they are walking. They can fall in snow, like it happens to me all the time, and they can break their arm or leg. And so I help them in the way I fill out their forms. I put the names, the school they go to, and the name of parent. Then I submit it to the pastor Biamungu, and their drivers who come morning and evening to pick them up to school and bring them home. So I keep the forms. I'm the one who keep the forms to fill out of them, and some other things I do. Thank you.
When do you have time to sleep? This is an amazing.
When I sleep, the phone rings. When I'm at work, the phone rings, and I have to answer.
Yeah,
Yeah.
Wonderful, wonderful. Elizabeth.
Well, as an Iowan, I think I started learning to be involved with a different organization myself. So I able to learn more about it, what's going on in here in Iowa, what resources we have. So as being and get involved with a lot of organization, I learned that I can help and support to other families too, who just arriving. So as I'm learning, I'm just sharing what I'm just learning with others. And we come out with a lot of ideas a lot of times. And our intention is just support our community. It's kind of like come on the same table. I've been working with the CWJ, be a member over there, working kind of like immigration table we have in the CWJ, and try to make people understand why people are afraid to the police or immigration officers. So, and because how you cannot, you have the right to talk, but also you're afraid to be talked because you are legal status. So teaching them their legal rights is very important too. So that's kind of like how I start learning and come with together with different organizations, just teaching the people and give the support that make feel them comfortable and safe place, so that be more trust to us and the organization, that they know where they can go if they need or they find in the trouble in the south. Because sometimes it's easy traffic stopping, just kind of like easy to deal, but they thinking it's a big trouble, because in our country and culture, if you get stopped by the police or you get involved with the police, you're actually in big trouble. It's not kind of like simple things that we see are normal. For us, it's very, very something big deal for us. So we kind of have to step in and try to stay away in contact with the police. So I think my main goal with the people is just make them understand that here police is safe and it's good to trust, and try to work with other organizations. I'm also learn about when you get detained for immigration, you have to pay a bond. The bond can be going for $5,000 to whatever the judge able to put it. We get bonds for 50,000, 60,000, 70,000. So family, and you have to pay the full amount. So family have to figure out in their own way how to pay, which means you sell everything possible that you can make the money to bring that money together and pay the bond. And because we live in Iowa, we have to go pay in Omaha, which is 4 hours drive, and come back here. So we came out with another organization. It's Iowa Prairie Lands Freedom. So that's kind of like where I get involved, and I'm one of the co-founders in there too. So we can start paying the bonds for families and help. And how that works is they apply, we make the decision to help and pay the bond. That money comes with us again, and we're able to pay another bond. So the process is just go in circle, and we're able to figure out our way. And that organization, it runs through community donations too. So that's another organization that goes. I also work with the Iowa Freedoms, who does visitation in jail. And myself, I do interpretation for them, because some they speak the language from their country. And I found 3 people 2 years ago that they didn't have that connection with their family. And their family in their country, they thinking that they are lost in some place. They don't have no way to communicate. So with my visit in jail, we able to give $20, and they make the phone calls to their family to let them know where they are. But for 3 months, they didn't have no way how to find it. So, and one of the reasons is because they didn't speak Spanish or English. They only speak the dialect. Some way I speak that dialect, and I able to help them. So that's kind of like how we able to figure out and found those people connect with their family. So, and that's one of the cases that it's in jail, but we have too many cases in the organization too. So we, lately we found Open Heartland here in Iowa City, which is more kind of like material support to the families. Kind of like if they need clothing, they able to come and pick it up any clothing. If they need just arriving people, at least 3 families by week, that's what we having, that they need winter gearing. So that's kind of, they don't know how bad can be the winter here, so the snow, and they thinking like, I talk to them and I'm like, this is what you kind of need it, because they think a jacket probably 2 or 3 at the same time, because they don't know how bad they need that it's gonna be the winter. But right now it's already cold, so people, they need gloves, snow boots, and we also have dry food we call despensa, which is cultural food for our culture, Latinx, and it's maseca flour, rice, beans, oil, sugar, and toilet paper. So we bagging, and we give once a week, they can come and pick it up, that food. And also we work with the kids doing the backpack distribution for school district, and that's we work with table to table community. We refer people to other organizations that they already exist, but because they don't feel comfortable because of the language, I just kind of like knowing people around my relationship with other people, just kind of make the phone call or text or email helps a lot to that person, that make feel them comfortable, because if I trust, they able to trust to that organization. So it's a lot actually going in Iowa City, to help people around. We have a lot of organization and churches working with all the communities and organizations together.
Oh, thank you. You mentioned relationships, which are so important, and I'm thinking that you are a born networker. I mean, you serve as a liaison, a connector of all of these different parties. So that's wonderful. And Ray, could you share with us some of your work in Waterloo?
Yes. So right now we are still currently in work. Our main office is in Des Moines, and right now for our Waterloo team, we're trying to the goal is to become our own independent, but don't know when that's gonna launch. But yeah, but as right now, we're still embark Waterloo, and before I do interpreting. I interpreted since I was 13 years old, and that age is very hard because a lot of places don't really trust you because you're not into yet, but now I'm over that, so it's easy for me to help because of the age and the legal stuff and all those things. And before, when I first started with Embark, I have worked with a lot of people in my community who need help with like direct services, like apply for food stamp or make phone calls, appointments, and also when it comes to like green card renewal, citizenships, and all those things. And with that, like sometimes it's very hard that like to draw a boundary with your own community, because they know you and they will call you up even though it's your weekends, you're on vacations. They will blow you up, and like, but also like boundary is easier said than done. So one time I trying to set up a boundary between my clients and from community and with my works, but it doesn't work well because they don't reach me. They will reach my families and they will come to my house, which is I have already moved. Yes, and then I also right now our program is mostly focused more onto youth and in education. So I also like communicate between the school and parents, interpreting stuff, so then they will know what's going on with their children in school, and also, and that's part of why I major in social work, because I want to be the resource and like a connections or a bridge, between whatever that system that like the resource that available in Iowa and to my community, so that I can give them a like a resource to refer. And I was saying, I know that the biggest issue is communications, because a lot of parents like they cannot communicate, and a lot of the time their children's it mostly grew up here, and I feel like I'm being lucky because I remember how to speak all my languages and fluent to my own languages. I don't know how. I grew up here more than when I came from. So I am like helping like actually become a communicator for places to the parents and students. So that's what I basically do.
Yeah, you are also a networker, and you're studying social work, but it seems to me you could teach social work. That you have all these skills, and I'm just struck by the fact that all of the panelists are really in their way, in their communities, expanding the rights of immigrants and refugees, and so you're very active in making all these lofty goals in the Universal Declaration a reality in your communities. I'd like to call upon Chris from his vantage point as a staff member with the UNHCR to reflect, to comment or respond or to reflect upon what you've heard about the lives and the work of these refugees and immigrants in Iowa.
Thank you very much. I'd first of all really like to say thank you to the panelists you had this evening in this discussion. The stories that each of you told are powerful, are important, and I think, as Ray was just talking about, really communicate and help others understand what the refugee experience is, and how all of us can work together to respond to that and to support refugees in regaining possession of their lives. I was also very gratified to hear what Mac was talking about. And Iowa, I know, is a very welcoming state, and as Mac was saying, has welcomed refugees, evacuees from Afghanistan, refugees really from around the world for many years. And I think this is something what Iowa and the people of Iowa and the government of Iowa are doing today for individuals like you have on your panel tonight is a reflection of the better angels of our nature, if you like. It's a reflection of who we are and who we want to be as human beings. I'm not talking about necessarily as Iowans or necessarily as Americans, although those all count as well, but as human beings. And I think that's something that's, again, at the center of understanding refugees and understanding the rights of refugees. As you mentioned early on in your discussion, in your introduction, Jim, there are rights that have been codified in a number of different documents. And one of those basic rights is the right not to be forcibly returned to a place of danger, where to a place where any individual has a genuine, well-founded fear of persecution and of a threat to his or her life and freedoms. And that's really at the heart of what we're talking about. I think it's important for everybody to remember that nobody chooses to be a refugee. And I'm sure your panelists will confirm that. It's not something that people do by choice. And you mentioned earlier, Jim, the different types. There are people moving around the world for a lot of different reasons, and that is true. And there are all kinds of aspects and ways to manage that and to respond to that. But what my organization, the UN Refugee Agency, is focused on very, very centrally are those individuals like the women on your panel this evening who didn't choose to move, who were forced to flee, who were running for their lives, and who deserve compassionate welcome and deserve the support that we are able to provide to them in helping them rebuild their lives and rebuild lives in dignity. I know it's still work. And listening to your panelists talk this evening, I was very moved. Each of you told of experiences you've had as refugees and talked in very concrete and particular terms about things like, for example, having enough to eat or having proper medical care. And listening to you tell your stories, which were very powerful, I recalled a conversation that I had several years ago with actually the High Commissioner of our organization. And we were talking about the importance of funding and of delivering the means, which include financial resources and political support and everything, for all of us to be able to do what it is that we're doing and responding to the needs of other human beings. But in talking about refugees in that context, he was mentioning what happens when the funds are not there. When we know the work that needs to be done, we know the people who are in need of assistance and protection for their lives. We know where they are, we know who they are, and we know how to respond to that. But if we don't have the means to do that, what then happens? And he used the example of, having a loaf of bread in one hand and a book in the other hand. And he said, which of these two is more important? Now, yes, you can make the case that, well, life, staying alive starts with food and shelter and clothing and warmth from the elements, those basic physical aspects of our existence. But in talking with him, it made me start thinking, well, what is a human life? What does a human life consist of? Is it just the loaf of bread and a glass of water and a roof over your head? Yes, those are necessary things for a human life. But it's also about things like education. And I think Ray spoke very eloquently about her own education and how she's helping share that with others now. There's education, and Elizabeth also spoke about the absolute importance of basic medical care and of the ability to work and to provide for yourself, for your family, and to give back to the community in which you live. these are also essential parts of any human life. And they are also rights. And they are rights that have been enshrined in international law and in domestic legislation in the United States and around the world, where these rights are recognized. You have these rights as a human being, and all human beings, including those who have been forced to flee their homes to find safety and to remain alive, still possess those rights. And so I think on this occasion, I just think it's important for everybody to remember that, like I said at the beginning, refugees are people just like you and me. We're all people, and any one of us could at any time be refugees. And many of you in the room have been refugees and know better than I what that experience is like. So I guess that's all I would say, is that those rights exist. They exist because we have all chosen to bestow those rights, and we have all accepted the obligations that we all have to respect those rights. And so it's very encouraging to listen to all of you speaking tonight. Mac, thank you for your work. The panelists, you're doing wonderful things, and I'm happy I got a chance to listen to you this evening. And I think what Iowa is doing, what Iowans are doing to receive and to welcome refugees that come to this country, and also to support humanitarian efforts for refugees that might not be in the United States, but that are displaced in places around the world and are in very urgent need. I think it's admirable, and I am grateful to all of you, and thank you for including me in this discussion this evening.
Thank you. Well, thank you for those compliments for Iowa, but we can all do better. And so on that note, what I'd like to do is ask the panelists very quickly to share with us how we in the audience can help you with your work or help refugees in our community more generally. So, Immaculée?
Thank you. There is many things we need you to help us, because we are not originally from United States of America. We don't know the laws. Most of the people, they don't know the laws. We need you to be close to us. I know you show us love. Keep it up. And help us to educate our children. This time, most of the children, they are misbehaving. We don't know what to do. Parents are crying, including me. We don't know how to educate our children. So be close to us, be on our side. This is my wishes.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Well, I think it's a lot that you guys can do, and already a lot of people are doing, just working with the closest organization that you feel. It's like any organization who works with immigrants and refugees. Actually, it's what you kind of like feel to get done. But if we focus more kind of like an educated our immigrants and refugees who just arriving just to learn more about the law and their rights in United States, I think this is kind of like the main point. She's right, kind of like feels like I'm working with the school district, and we feel like it's actually a crisis with the kids, because kids, they think they learn it, and the teacher's saying that they have the right, but they misunderstanding what is the rights. The rights that we can, our culture for raise our kids is very different, and I think it's kind of like similar with other people from Arabic, Congo, Africa. All we raise in different way, but at the same, we have the same goal, having a pretty good citizen person. So we don't want to live a delinquent in the community. We want a good citizen. So our goal is having a good citizen. How we also have a right as a parent, how you able to educate your kids. So I think it's one of the biggest, and it's just kind of like if you and a part of the church or having other places, organization, I think it's just go there and say how you able to ask, how I able to help. And they able to, each organization, they have their own goals, and they want to support for the community. So just go up there and help, or even in the neighborhood. I'm just all the time, relationships, just go and say how I can help you. What do you need?
Yep, and we have a list of the organizations which we'll put up on the screen in a minute. But Ray, would you like to help us know what we can do to help?
Well, what I want to say is that lend us a helping hand. And there's a lot of like nonprofit organizations that work with refugee and immigrants. And if you could, like every little thing, if you know, like she mentions, education part, it's very, very like big part. Also a main point of why we're here and grow up here, because we value educations, and any education that you can give us, and helping hands, and in any way work with different organizations, different place, it will really help us.
Great, thank you so much. Well, I put up on the screen some ways that, to supplement what the panel said, ways in which we can help. UNHCR, the UN Refugee Agency, is funded, not well enough, but it is funded by governments, including the US government, and by private donations. And so one thing we can do right now with your phones is to text refugees to 306-44. And that will provide a link where you can send a message directly to our senators and Representative Miller Meeks. And if you're watching remotely and you're not in the 1st District, or you're not in Iowa, if you put in your zip code, your message will be sent to your senators and your representative. So that's really important as Human Rights Day approaches, to show that there is a constituency here that wants the U.S. to give constructive leadership. You can donate to UNHCR through by going to that website, which is listed. And then we've put the websites of several of the organizations here, including the ones represented on the panel and others. So there are lots of opportunities. And while you're looking at that, we do now have some time for questions and answers. So I'd like to invite anyone who has a question, a brief question, I hope, to
raise your hand. I'll bring the
hand.
microphone to you so that the people online can hear your question.
So this question is for Ray. Is there a sizable Burmese community in Waterloo?
Yes, we've grown a lot. Like every year, there's a new like families who came from other state. I would say about like between 3,000 to 5,000 like individual is in Waterloo.
Hi, my name is Coco. I'm also from Myanmar as well. So I moved here last year, so I just got here like a little over a year now. All the panelists are really great to hear all the stories, and it's really amazing. I mean, I moved here as political asylum as well because of the military coup. So the experience that I had is like way far beyond that. You know, I mean, not really, that cruel compared to you guys actually, But then I can't really imagine like how you guys have been like really going through all these experiences. I really appreciate you guys sharing that. I mean, my question is like because we have this kind of like a lot of we have like UNHCR, UN human rights, declarations and stuff like that. But then in reality, when you actually like move to the United States, you still have a lot of challenges, as a refugee. I mean, refugee as a status, when you have a status, actually, I mean, that's kind of a little easier. But there are a lot of transitioning period, as in like, because I came here at humanitarian parole visas, I have like 1-year visas, actually. I mean, no status at all, It's not, there are a lot of legal challenges, a lot of bureaucratic, procedures. I mean, you guys already actually mentioned a lot of support that you guys are actually providing. But at the same time, like before getting status, I mean, that kind of transition period is also like really, really tough time, like as a person, like because you're not allowed to work, you don't have the work authorizations, and also you don't have any legal support that you can actually get, So I think, is there any support that you guys are actually helping out to like fresh comer like to the United States without having any status, yet, because USCIS taking so long as well. Like everything is like forever, taking forever. Like, even like for the work permit, or like even you get invitation for your asylum application. It might probably take for years. So I think, and also like a lot of laws only protect when you in the United States when you have the status. When you don't have, even you can't even renew your driver license. So those kind of things are like quite kind of interesting in a way as well, because you might probably think that when you're here, then you're protected with all these things. But when you're actually here, not really at all until you have the status. So that's very, that's why I think I'm a newcomer to Iowa as well. I mean, I want to also like help, in some way, as in, because I'm like lucky enough to sort of like maybe look into things, maybe read things as well. Maybe I might probably have a bit of understanding, but I can't even imagine like people coming here without any language. They have to like understand the language first before even like, doing anything at all, So the stress that they're getting is like enormous. So I think, that, I can really see those gaps, So I think it's really helpful that I'm attending this event, and I'm looking forward to actually looking into, what kind of things that I could also support within that as well. Thanks.
Elizabeth, you talked about bond and providing bond and people going to pay bond. What is that bond for? Can you explain more about the bond?
When you get detained to immigration, you get kind of like it's when you get detained here in jail, regular, but you pay the 10% to get out of jail. So what this, they put you a charge because you are in jail. And that charge, it's kind of like securing or buying a little of the time that you're able to figure out a lawyer that can follow your case and figure out if you stay or you get back to your country. So it's just that money, it's buying time, basically, for you to figure out your legal status. If you stay and you cannot go and apply for a work permit, or if they decide, even if you pay the bond, the judge can be saying that you get deported. You have 30 days to leave the country, and that's when they have to leave the country. But if you have money and you hired a good lawyer, they can fight for your case and see what is the legal that you can able to apply for what legal status. And can be taken right now, like he's just said, forever. Can be 1 year to 10 years, and you're not allowed to work. You are not allowed to get any benefits, and no way. If you don't have legal status, you cannot get basically nothing at all. You're kind of unprotected and you own. And that's how the organization kind of support in that way. But the bond is basically just to buy the time to figure out if you stay or not because you get detained for immigration.
Elizabeth, do you know who the bond goes to? Like, where does that money go? Who gets the money?
It's just the jail, the state immigration, and it's kind of like secure that you are going to stay in that place. You are not leaving to other, or you're not running away. So it's that money comes back when you follow the status, the legal status that you're going, and at the end can be taken to 3 to 5 years. That money is when it's come back again to the person who paid that.
With interest?
No, sadly not.
We have time for one more question.
Thank you to all of you for being here and for the incredible work that you're doing. I'm struck by how much work you all do, as networkers, but also as connectors, right? In terms of connecting folks to the resources, the small resources that do exist. And I'm sort of wondering in a larger scale, but also to Coco's question, somebody's newly arrived and they aren't plugged in. They don't know Ray or Elizabeth, or they don't know you yet. So how do they find these things out? Is there is there some kind of central point? I mean, obviously Mac's doing a lot of work too, but where do people start to find out where all of these sort of all the pieces that weave together a survivable life?
Well, sometimes can be like the neighbor who lives across, or maybe they know to each other, or they know a friend, and they just pass the word. Like it's just like, hey, this person is helping to do this. So I'm not legal assistant, I'm not a lawyer or not social work. But I actually, that's what the first thing, I'm not a lawyer and tell them what I'm not doing, but this is what you can do, and this is the resources that we have. And they're just connecting with everyone around the organization that already exists. And it's kind of like just work together with all the organization. It'd be great because they can have more access. If they pass to us, hey, this is say like they need a material things, okay, can you help with this? Okay, yes, as Open Heartland, we can able to help. But also right now that I'm working as a culture liaison for the school district, it's another way that I able to connect with the families, and I able to figure out like to see how we connect with a lot of organizations around. So we need more liaison in the school district for all the people.
I think
who are
Mark wanted to mention
I
something
noticed
too.
that Mark has his hand up, and so I'm going to call on him for the last question or comment.
Yeah, it's not a question. It's more of a comment and sort of a reassurance and maybe a sense of accountability as well. First and foremost, refugees and immigrants who come under extenuating circumstances and dire situations go through a lot, and that goes without saying. And I think as a network, we continue to learn and grow as much as we can to ensure that the people that we are supporting have accessibility to the resources and services they need and at times entitled to. Which is to say, there is a robust and strong network of refugee and immigrant supports across the state, respectively in central Iowa, in the eastern part of the state, Lynn and Johnson counties, as well as western Iowa as well. The gentleman, Coco, who posed a question in reference to his personal story, I want to reassure you that there are mechanisms to help support those who are particularly with humanitarian parole status and adjustment of that status to potential permanent residency and eventually citizenship. Which is to say that it's really an issue of accessibility and awareness as opposed to a lack of services. If there are a lack of services or mechanisms, those are identified through different mechanisms in environments such as these, panel discussions and conversations that we have with the community. But a lot of the times, to the question that was just posed, and I'm sorry I missed your name, it's how do we access these and how do we get them into the hands of the people who are providing the services. So I know that we don't have a lot of time left tonight, but I did share my email in the chat. I'll be more than happy to share what's happening across Iowa and in your respective communities and how we can get these resources and supports out to people. They are out there, they exist. I don't want them to fall by the wayside or to not be acknowledged, because a lot of people are doing a lot of great work, and that needs to be recognized as well. So happy to make those connections and happy to do any kind of presentations or work with all of you, and looking forward to hearing from you. Thank you.
Great. Thank you, Mark. There may be other questions that people have. In the interest of time, perhaps our panelists will stay a few minutes and answer any questions or enter into discussion with you. But right now, I'd like to do two things. First, I want to thank everyone, the audience in the room, the audience that's watching remotely. I want to thank our co-sponsors, the Iowa City Office of Equity and Human Rights, the Iowa City Public Library, who has provided this facility and has handled the technology, and the Refugee and Immigrant Association. And then I want to call on Pastor Wendell from the Refugee and Immigrant Association, who I believe is going to make a presentation to two of his members, right?
And while they're coming up, I just want to remind everybody that we do have a book display on the second floor for International Human Rights Day. So after the program, head upstairs and take a look.
Good. Wonderful.
Thank you, Jim.
This one's still on. You can just talk right there.
Thank you. My name is Piamungu Belton Wendo. I'm coming from Refugee and Immigrant Association, and I'm glad to be here with you. So here we have, you had a story from Sister Makili saying about one of our community member who came with a special idea in the community, and we did follow that, and it is helping the community. Did I left my phone? I want to show you something. Oh, Dr. Peter, thank you. Your mom could say thank you, sir. Okay. When you go to our web, you're gonna see this picture. You're gonna see kids, and you will see a red van. So one of the days we met and we sat together with the community members, and we had a question about how we can help. And that gentleman, he came with the idea, say, we have kids that are walking from home to school every day without transportation. What if we can buy a car or a van so that we can take kids to school? And we try to go to the school district and ask them about giving us a van, and they say they don't have that answer, or they don't have that car. So we came again and we sat and we said, what can we do? And both of him and the sister Immaculée, they sat down and they came with that idea that what if we can contribute about ourselves and have money and they collect money and see if we can buy by our own. And we started, and she was the one collecting the money, and the people, they started donating in the community by ourselves, parents and all volunteers. And we came with the money, and we bought this first red van. And in the community, they said red van, even if there are multiple vans that are red. But when you say red van in Cedar Rapids, they always know that it is only that van. And then now we started the program with 5 kids, but now we are taking every single day 40-something kids to school. Yeah. But now, because of that idea, that we say, no, we have to congratulate him and recognize him with that idea, because it was too special, and it is now helping many families. Parents are going to work, children are going to school every day with big smiles. So we recognize him for that. And then now, this is our 3rd year doing that. Now we are moving from one van to the second van. So we thank God for bringing that man to us, and with that special idea. So we have a certificate here of recognition. This certificate is proudly presented to Felician Kulikie for exceptional contribution to community empowerment service and integral leadership in service to others. So, also, I have to speak Swahili so that you can know what I'm saying. So, also, I'm going to call Sister Immaculée too. We thank for what they are doing in the community. Since I came in the United States, she was helping people, and she helped me too. And until now, she's helping women and children, taking care of them until they are happy in the community. So we thank everything that you are doing. Asante kwa kazi uko nafanya kwa community, na tunashukuru kwa kuleta mawazo hayo. Asante mama. Thank you.
So that's a wonderful note on which to end. Thank you so much. And I want to thank our panelists in the room and our panelists remotely. This has been a wonderful, rich discussion, and I think we've all learned a lot, and I hope are inspired to do what we can to work with our refugee and immigrant sisters and brothers to advance the goals of the Universal Declaration of Human Rights. So, we stand adjourned. Thank you.